We may have just played what is inevitably going to be near the top, if not at the top, of our top 10 lists at the end of the year.
That's quite the call, but I do think it'll definitely be on the list, if not way up there on the list.
It's on the short list, to say the least. This is Saltfjord from Aporta Games. If you're not familiar, these are the same people who did Revive a couple years ago, which I really liked. You liked a little less.
I was less hot on it.
Yeah, it's definitely a more sort of like this sort of game. But Saltfjord kind of re-implements a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the same buttons that you can imagine from Santa Maria from years ago, also from Aporta Games. This one avoids problematic themes for sure, but it does do a lot of the same things mechanically, where you're building this sort of like almost a tableau of tiles that's kind of a grid where columns and rows are going to fire off depending on dice that you draft, and that alone puts smiles on our faces.
Yes. And really, there's a very simplified use of the actions. So you're really either fulfilling contracts with contract completion, putting more of those tiles out on your board, or you're going up a tech tree.
Yeah, the tech tree is got some interesting things going on. It's going to help you definitely perform better throughout the game at various things. And then the one big thing that you can do, which I did in my game, is go out here back and forth and gather fish and some other surprises.
Somehow there was gold you found in the water.
You know what? If you go out there, you might find anything in there. But yeah, there's a significant amount of points to be scored in a few different ways. Not a ton of different ways. No. We found effectively two main umbrellas of scoring your points. Going out here in the fjord, right?
Yes.
This is it.
Yep.
You can go all the way out here, and as you do, you're filling your boat with these tiles. Now, you don't know exactly what tiles you have access to, but again, if you go up a tech tree, you're going to gain access to better tiles, and you're going to be able to even take a look at two tiles and pick from one. So you're able to manage that a lot better. But you can score a lot of points there if you invest in that. On the flip side, you can spend a lot of time building out your board.
Yes, and when you're building out your board, so you're taking these pieces, and they're going to not only give you actions to take when you go past them, or resources to gain when you land on them, they're also going to have these boardwalks in the middle. So when a row or column is completed, all of those boardwalks fire off, and you get all of those things. So if you're like me and you like the little Tetris of it, I did everything except for two spaces because I really wanted to try to get it all as filled as possible, because I love that idea of like when you finish a row or column, it was like, cool, I got 3 points here and a gold and a wheat, and now I'm set for whatever I'm trying to do.
Yeah, whereas I did a lot less on mine. You can see the tiles and the empty spaces that I don't have, but what I did do is the tiles and the buildings I did create here were a lot of actions that help support my strategy of going out into the fjord and fishing as much as humanly possible. So I was a bit of a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
But I was able to compete nonetheless, for sure.
I will say, too, that we both did a lot in the tech trees, which can also bring you scoring. And they have different scoring depending on which game you're playing, too. So there are multiple of those. And in ours, they were like, basically, can you get to it first? You can trade in fish for points. Or you can trade in these lobsters that you got a lot of from fishing.
Yeah, we both got some lobsters, but I did get, I think, more of them from fishing. And at the beginning of the game, I thought, well, I don't know how many I'm going to get from that. I might just go up to the second and get 4 points. But yeah, I think I ended up getting like 16 or more points because I had so many lobsters here. And like Emily said, and I know a lot of Euros do this, but I do think the variability of just even those 4 things, because there's not a ton of different scoring here, and these 4 things are going to be a significant part of it. They're going to dictate how you manage your game.
Yes.
You might want to go up here and grab these points. 14 points is not nothing in this game. I think we ended in the 130 range.
Yes.
So 14 points is not nothing. And then there's some really unique ones, like this one here dictated that at the end of the game, you wanted to have die in your 6th column or your 6th row as much as possible, because each of the die at the end of the game were worth 3 points that way. And you scored what there?
I scored, so 3 times 6, 18. But that also meant that throughout the game, I was looking at it and being like, okay, when I build things out, I want to build it so there are spaces for my die to stop at the end. Because the way these work is on your turn, you're going to draft a die, right? And you're going to draft either a white die or an orange die. Orange dice are going to allow you to go with rows, and white dice are going to allow you to do columns. And as you do that, it's going to go down the whole thing. It's going to stop at every yellow. It's a resource you're getting. or like this one is upgrading a resource, which we haven't even talked about the
Yeah.
tech tree yet. And then the red is gonna be an action. So this would be building, get another resource, and then one of these actions. So as I'm building this out, I'm like creating these spaces that are really great for me, but we are both drafting from the same pool. So David could see that and go, I'm never gonna let you have that anymore.
Yeah. I would say of all the dice drafting games we've played, and there are plenty, and we do love our dice drafting here. I would say based on our experience with this and what I remember from the original Santa Maria as well, is you really find it to be incredibly competitive, and you are conscious, very conscious, of not only what you're trying to do, but what the other player is trying to do because the limitations on those dice. So we play 3 rounds, and each round you're going to take 3 white dice. You'll always get 3 white dice. In the first round there, though, there's only 1 orange dice for each of us. And then in the second round, they add a couple and they add a couple. So in the third round, we're going to get 3 orange and 3 white. But you're limited. So if in my first 2 turns I take my orange or my first couple orange in round 2, then Emily knows that the orange out there are hers. Like she doesn't have to worry about them. So there's actually times where you might want to consider not doing that so that the other player has to continue to think a little harder, because it makes it very easy on someone to go, okay, well, I know that's what I have to work with, so I'll take this white instead because that'll hurt David or something like that.
And the unique thing we had in our game too is that we each have player powers, right?
Yeah.
And so your player power allowed you to switch.
Oh yeah, this was a beautiful thing.
So were allowed to do whites for rows and orange for columns if you wanted. So that's even more of a mind game on it for me, thinking like, dang, he can use that 4 for both a column or a row, and which one would be better for him. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that flexibility. I mean, this is the kind of power I always gravitate towards because I love just not having to worry about a rule.
Did choose first.
I did choose first. That was legal though.
That was legal. I went first.
And there are some powers out here too that if you go up a certain tech tree and get right here, you can get another power. And there were some really interesting powers out here. There's one I actually thought that I would take that I didn't ultimately take, where I could change my die faces to anything by using a fish here. That combined with what I had felt like
you so much freedom.
you could do whatever you wanted. As long as you spent a fish, you could go wherever you needed to go. I ended up taking something else that was basically enhancing my ship because I had that strategy to go out there. I'd gone up this level here and upgraded my ship. So by the end of the game, or actually at the end of the second round, I had this ship upgraded plus this, so I could spend more time out here. I could go up all the way out here and fill my ship with things and get points for some of the bigger things. I came back with my boat a couple times and got, 20-some points?
It was so many points. But
Yeah, I think I got 24 points at least twice, which... So 50 points, no fewer than 50 points in a 130-point game.
But to be clear, we ended very close. It was 132 to 130, and the reason was that I was able to make up some of those points with doing these contracts as well.
Yeah, I didn't so much.
No. And the great thing about the contracts is that at the end of the round, you're actually going to get to do one more action of these, which will determine player order. And then you're going to get to do, for every contract you've completed, you're going to get to do these actions that many times. So I was doing my sailing mainly not when I took actions, but at the end of my round, because I had 3 contracts already that let me sail each time. And then I was getting fish and points. I was getting to upgrade resources, which is really cool with this resource track. The bottom is always going to be fish, so that's the most plentiful thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the base of this tree.
And then it'll go up to like a first tier, and then to like a second tier, and they all lead up to the third tier, which is gold. At any point, if you have something in one of these tiers, you can say, I'm going to downgrade it. Instead of a plank, I'm just going to get a wood because I want to use a wood for something. Or you can trade it in for 2 fish. So it can come down here to the bottom. It can be 2 fish. Or if it's a gold, it can be downgraded to anything.
Yeah, it has a lot of flexibility, particularly compared to how resources worked in Santa Maria. In Santa Maria, you'd have to hunt for building tiles that gave you specific sort of trade actions so that you could do a lot of converting. This one allows you to do conversions a lot. There's obviously the upgrade on your board, but like Emily just pointed out, you can do a lot of upgrading just at the cost of some fish. You can spend 2 fish, and if you do that, take any piece and upgrade it to its next level. So it gives you that flexibility so you can get a lot more done, and they give you a lot more opportunity to spend various resources. There's far more resources in this than there are in the original game. And when I say original game, this is largely a very different game. It just feels like that in many mechanical sort of ways. But you can spend those resources to do a lot of things going up the tech tree.
Yep.
I mean, all over those
Filling the
contracts.
contracts. Some of the contracts are like, if you spend a food or you spend a grain, you get even more points. So like, I had 2 of those at the end. At the end, I was able to spend 2 grain and get 10 points just for this as like an end of round action. It's not even like its own action. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, you're also given some points on the contracts at the end. These are probably nominal, but if you have sets, so you can see I don't have even one full set, but Emily has 2 full sets. So that gave her what, 6 points? Mm-hmm. So you get a little points there too. But I was really amazed at how close we ended up being. I love a game, particularly when you're in the hundreds of points and you're 130 to 2 points away in the 130s. That is awesome to me because I feel like it lets people feel like they're in it.
Yes.
You know, you just never know. And speaking of that, those contracts you see on Emily's board, when you take those, you take them from here and you put them face down. So every other player at the table, while they did see or take it, it's very difficult to remember just how many points are printed on those
David was
tiles.
very worried about me until I flipped those over and said, actually, we have quite a few points here.
But she had quite a few more points than I did. I had 7 points total from my contracts, and she had quite a bit more. And we didn't even play with this wagon expansion. There's a sort of variant that comes in the game. I did look at the rules a little bit. Everyone gets a wagon in the upper left-hand space of their board. And throughout the game, whenever you're using a die in the column or row where a wagon exists, you first, before you use the die on anything, move the wagon sort of out of the way, one way or the other, orthogonally. And wherever the wagon lands, you get to fire that off as well. Not only that, but you have this sort of ever-going goal of trying to get your wagon from here all the way down here because the wagon is going to be worth points depending on what column and or row it's in.
So if you get it all the way to the bottom, you're going to be 6 times 6, 36 points just from that wagon. And you could get a second wagon as well when you put that track out.
Yeah, that expansion also comes with a tile that covers this tech tree that gives you additional wagons.
I think I would have really liked that in my game.
Yeah. Emily is very fixated on that board. I was less so. You probably would have crushed me had we played with that expansion. But that is Saltfjord. I know we didn't really give you a thorough, like, here's the turn structure and things like that, but we wanted to get our thoughts out on this. Emily, what did you think? I know we kind of said right off the bat.
I'm going to be honest. After we played it, I have not stopped thinking about it. I just really like, and I didn't play Santa Maria, so I didn't get that fun experience of this, so maybe it's just because it's my first time doing it, but I love this mechanic of like taking a die, I love dice drafting, and then actually getting to build out my little engine and do it very carefully each time. I felt so smart getting to do it, and it felt so good getting to pick the right dice. I loved it.
Yeah, it's really satisfying. I know we touched on it, but the way you place those tiles, you can really set up a row or column to where it's like, this is perfect. The first thing gives me a wood, the next thing gives me a wood, the next thing lets me build.
Exactly.
You use the wood to build. Like you can, and now on the flip side, you could, set them up so they don't work so well, and you get wood at the end, and you're like.
But you have a little bit more flexibility in this game. Like you have these workers you can put out too. So.
That's true. And that the Santa Maria did have that. You could spend money to do that. This one gives you a little worker at the beginning of one that you can also, as a free action, just place it on a tile and do that action. We also didn't even mention that if there's something on a tile, like a die, it blocks that. So you can't fire that action off again. So when you're building it out, say if I played a die on this one, this is blocked and this is blocked. So I could just do this wood in the end.
So you really do have to plan it and think about what you're doing. It's not just like, ooh, I'm going to make the best column or row and then it'll be easy going from there. It's what am I going to draft? How am I going to do it? What order am I going to do it? That's what I loved about it.
Yeah, that's what she loved. I'd say the thing that stood out to me the most is the player powers. These things, as we played and we looked at these finally and thought, oh, wow, how much that would synergize. And the powers are all like, holy cow, that is really, really powerful. Like when I took this, when we drafted these, Emily was like, I knew you were going to take that.
Yes, I did.
Like, I just love that flexibility.
But
And then
they're
when you,
all good. Like
Yes.
mine was that for workers, I get to, when I put them in the space with the either or, I got to take both of them.
Yeah, which is huge.
Which is huge. I'm like taking so many more actions as long as I can pay for them. It's huge. These are really big things. And the fact that you can get a second one, I think is very cool.
Yeah, so anyway, that is Saltfjord. If you have any questions about it, please make them in the comments below. I can guarantee we'll be happy to talk to you about it. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.